we would like to thank very much our colleague Catherine, who suggested this nice song. So now you know what energy means for these guys of the 50s, I guess. They didn't mention internet in their song, but I can tell you that I had an internet breakdown today, and I felt like a bit energy poor actually also today. So I hope that after this energetic song, you feel fit for a discussion. So on behalf of Energy Rights Forum team and George, who is co-moderating the session today, we would like to thank all of you for joining us on day 3 session of the Energy Rights Forum. And I also would like to thank our speakers of the day, Sarah Coupechoux, Pablo Sanchez, Martha Meyers, and Aurélie Ciuti, who kindly accepted to share their experience and reflection on this key question that we have today: can a right to energy solve energy poverty? So, as you all may have seen, 3 pre-recorded videos are made available. So another big thank to Katarina Zampi, who is here trying to join us today from the University of Groningen, Fabien Gay from the French Senate, and Irene Escorihuela from the Observatory on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights from Spain. So they also have contributed to this reflection about the right to energy as a solution to energy poverty. And if you have watched them, you might be aware that the answer to our question of the day is more complex than it seems, actually. So that's why I'm going to give the floor to the speakers in a minute, just after presenting the setup of the session. So as you may have seen in the schedule on the internet, this session is divided in 3 different sessions. The first hour is dedicated to a panel discussion with our 3 guest speakers, who will each have around 10 minutes for their presentation. During this session, see we have already some kind of summary I think this is the summary of day 1, Luisa, if I'm not mistaken. What is energy? That was the question of day 1. Actually, we started with this question and we ended up with even more questions. What is a right to energy? Is it universal? What form should it take? What is the best institutional setting for it, considering that energy is a social construct? That was one of the big message of day 1. Well, we can't go through all the discussions of day 1, but you have the summary here. And I suppose we have the recording for day 2 as well. And day 2 tackle the question about what does that mean, a right to energy? Is it a right to free or affordable energy? Day 2 was also really nice because day 2 gave us concrete examples of actions, such as the free electricity programs in Flanders, the disconnection ban for vulnerable citizens in Catalonia, and how civil society in the UK is now mobilized to require universal support to energy that is not stigmatizing, with the big question that is summarized here in the drawing: who pays what? And I think we didn't really get the answer for that, but the question is raised. So based on the previous conclusions, day 3 would like to address how a right to energy should be designed to ensure that it has a positive impact on energy poverty. So we would like to understand today how other rights, such as the right to housing or the right to water, were established and how they contributed to improve the situation of vulnerable citizens, despite some flaws that are going to be discussed today. So what kind of lessons can we draw from these rights to establish this right to energy? As you may have already seen in the pre-recorded videos, our 3 speakers kind of agree that we need the right to energy, but they also all agreed that it's probably not enough, or at least it can only be considered as a first step. And I think this is something we will probably hear again today. So the questions raised in these pre-recorded videos can be summed up a bit like this. Shall we consider energy as an essential common good? And in that case, how energy supply should be designed to ensure that vulnerable people can meet their energy needs in their daily life? Shall we consider right to energy as a human right, as a universal right? What should be the role of the legislator, of the state, of the energy suppliers, of the local authorities, of the civil society? How to give a voice to vulnerable citizens so that they can express their needs? Under which conditions could the right to energy bring solutions to energy poverty? So these are some of the questions that are tackled in the videos, but that are going to be tackled also today during the discussion. So you see that the menu of the day is quite broad. I'm not sure the 2 hours are enough to answer all these questions, but we tried our best. So to waste no more time, I will give the floor to George, who is going maybe to say a couple of other words about the setup of the session. George?
Thank you, Rachel. So hello, everyone, from me as well. Nothing much to add because I think we're all anxious to hear our speakers. Just to point again to the Miro board, to which you see the link pasted in the chat. So it's the same board that for those of you who have participated in the session yesterday, so it's the same link, the same board. You have to go to the frame for day 3, and then you'll find there a frame that is dedicated to your thoughts as you hear the speakers throughout this first hour of the session. So whatever strikes you, whatever you want to, whatever takeaway you have, grab a sticky note from the Miro board and write down what you think. That goes for the rest of the session as well. Although in the second part, you will see that you have to use the second part of the board for day 3. But if anything comes back to your mind, just feel free to add whatever you feel like adding there. Apart from that, as Rachel said, as you hear the speakers, please use the chat for any questions you might want to ask. For any of the speakers, as they come to you, we will curate them. So we will make a selection, hoping that there will be questions out of which to select. And then during the Q&A section, we will direct them towards the speakers. Since we have Katerina with us, that you have seen in the pre-recorded video, but that goes as well for the other pre-recorded videos. If you have questions specifically for Katerina, since she joined us for the session, but for the others that you have seen in the pre-recorded videos, please also use the chat. It's best if you point towards the speaker to whom you are addressing the question, and we will make sure even to direct them later towards them. So use the chat responsibly, but please feel free to make use of it as much as you can. So that's everything from me from now, and I will vanish so that we leave the floor for the speakers.
Thank you, George. So as you already know, there is a live stream at the moment. So we are recorded, audio and video. We are also graphically recorded, and we are also recorded in written because Linda is also taking notes of the discussion. So thank you, Linda, for doing it. So Sarah, can you join us with your camera now? So Sarah Coupechoux is research officer at Fondation Abbé Pierre in France. So Sarah, here you are. So a question to you, Sarah. What are the lessons you recommend us to draw from your experience of a right to housing and its implementation in France? What kind of mistakes should be avoided when establishing a right to energy? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you to give me the opportunity to speak today. First of all, I will give you a little presentation of me and my organization. So my name is Sarah Coupechoux. I am in charge of European topics in Fondation Abbé Pierre. I do not practice so much law anymore, but I'm a lawyer, and I was in charge of strategic litigation during 10 years in our foundation here in Paris. So our foundation is well known in France because we have a founder really well known, l'Abbé Pierre, and we are funding some housing projects, and we are doing we do a report, annual report, to denounce the state of housing exclusion in France each year. So today we are speaking of the housing rights. I'm sorry because I just saw that my presentation is half in English, half in French on the slides, and I'm sorry for that. So the right to housing, next slide please. The right to housing in France appeared in discussion in early 2000s. The idea of the development came from the fact that the positive law did not allow for the right to housing to be invoked in court. So, for example, a person, people who are in eviction procedure cannot invoke this right in front of the court to ask the delay, for example. So the right to housing existed already from international law. For example, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in its Article 25 refers to housing. The International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, European Social Charter, European Charter of Human Rights. All those texts have reference to housing or to a minimum standard of life. We can see housing right in French law from since 1982 with the Kilo law. We saw it also in 1989, 1990, and finally in 1995 when the Constitutional Court decided that the right to decent housing was an objective of constitutional value, building on the right to an adequate standard of living in the preamble of the Constitution. But the problem was that none of these instruments were binding. International text could not be invoked in court or only with difficulty. The law provided definitions, but no obligation for any institution and no sanctions. Finally, the decision of the Constitutional Council had given the state an obligation of means, but not an obligation of result. So association, organization on the ground were looking for ways to make this right effective. And it was the High Committee for the Housing of Disadvantaged People that first raised this idea of building a responsibility around 2003 at the moment. So this opportunity came from different conditions at one moment at the end of the year 2006. And this opportunity came from an association, Les Enfants de Don Quichotte. This association decided to put up a lot of tents at the middle of the winter when it is really cold along the Canal Saint-Martin in Paris. And it was amazing because the public was invited to come and to share the daily life of homeless people by spending a night in one of the red tent that you can see on the picture, lined up along the water. And the media and the public opinion were mobilized around this event and were waiting for a reaction from the government. And few months earlier, Nicolas Sarkozy, who were candidate for the presidential elections, had mentioned the idea of a right to housing. So Jacques Chirac, when he did the last speech at the television at the 31 December, asked for a vote of a law before the end of his term, which would establish an enforceable right to housing. So it was a great opportunity for organization on the ground, and they all works together around HDD Carmonde in a platform for the right to housing. And it was also necessary for each organization to collaborate with each other and to allow to have some conflicts together and to give common proposal to the government. So next slide, please. So what is now the housing right in France, how it works? First of all, only people in need of housing can claim their rights. It could be an evidence, but it's not so much. So the law had 7 categories of people which have this possibility. So people in need, like people in eviction proceedings, people in substandard housing, homeless people, and so on, 7 categories. And when they are into one of these categories, they must make an amicable appeal to a commission that is run at local level. This is a way for the institution to see if the households is in one of these categories. And depending on the local housing situation, the commission decides whether or not the person can claim the right to housing. If so, the state must rehouse them within 6 months. After 6 months, the person can go to court to force the state if she doesn't have a home. Finally, if the state still does not house the person can ask for compensation with a new trial. What does it mean for people? It means a lot of files to be filed in, a lot of documents to find, to copy, to join, to understand what the commission needs as a proof of the situation. It means to use a lawyer to go to the trial. It's not an obligation, but the process is really complicated for people. It means deadlines to be respected. If you don't respect it, you can lose your right in a way because there is a lot of demand. And if you don't go to the trial at the right moment, the state consider that you are not in a priority to be rehoused. It means decisions to understand because law is not easy for people, letter to write it, and so on. So next slide, thank you. So what are the positive points of this law? First of all, it gave some visibility of the phenomenon of housing exclusion in France. It was really important for us to show that it is not possible for the state to minimize the reality of what people are living. As I said, the Commission is at the local level, so we can monitor the situation in each region, and we can see how is the housing situation in each region in France. And in the end, there is an obligation for the state to rehouse households. Today, 190,000 persons were housed thanks to this law. It is great, but it's not enough. And French government is going too slowly. That's why the ECHR condemned France in 2015 for the violation of the right to a fair trial, Article 6. Next slide, please. So I give you some numbers to illustrate it, to illustrate what I said, and you can see that since 2018, almost 1 million applications have been filed. There are really few appeals. People do not defend themselves. It's really complicated for people to access to their rights. They have to understand the procedure. They have to make file. They have to be supported by organization, and a lot of them cannot do it without this support. For example, you saw the compensation appeal. It's just around in 2019 around 1,050 appeals. It's really low. Next slide, please. So how we can go to a forcible right to energy? What is the place? I think maybe you know this this pyramid, the pyramid of Kelsen of norms. The most important law are at the top, and those below must respect those above. So what is the place of that kind of right? In France, for example, the right to housing does not exceed the place of the law. So we have some decree, for example, that respect this right, but this is not so binding. Today, we cannot use, for example, the right to housing, even if you go to the Commission and to the court, to claim some delay for an eviction. A person in eviction proceeding cannot say, "Don't evict me, I have a right to housing." No. Eviction in France have increased by 100% in 10 years. We have to ask ourselves where a right to energy would fit into this pyramid, because responsibilities would be better shared if it is on the top. You have seen that the right to housing is aimed at the most vulnerable people. Will they be able to defend themselves individually? Are we defending the idea of an individual response, a guarantee, an insurance, or are we defending the idea of a universal right, which could take much longer to implement? And last slide, please. At the Fondation Abbé Pierre, we have tried to have the right to energy expressed by a judge, by showing with the law on housing decency that energy poverty was a violation of an already existing and binding right. So we have a decree on decent housing, and we won't use the state of housing to demonstrate that the energy poverty is a violation of the right. So it works for the recognition of this right as a part of indecency. The idea is to oblige the landlords to carry out renovation work and sometimes to obtain compensation for households. Well, this is some food for thought. I hope it will help in your reflection, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for this very rich food for thought indeed. So avoid a complex procedure, make it accessible to the people in need, give visibility to the question, and we should try to reach a higher level than the basic one, so in the hierarchy of the norms. So I think for me, this would be the three main takeaways from your presentations. Thank you very much, Sarah. I will give the floor to Pablo Sanchez from the European Federation of Public Services, who coordinated the first European Citizens Initiative about the right to water. And we would be curious to know, Pablo, what kind of lessons we can draw from the right to water. I mean, how did you put this question on the agenda, and what kind of results did you expect and even achieved with the right to water? Thank you, Pablo.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, very well.
Okay, so thanks for the invite. So I'm not going to move much because otherwise I'm going to get off camera. Well, first a very briefly introduction. Yeah, my name is Pablo Sanchez. I work for the European Federation of Public Services Unions, which is a European umbrella organization of trade unions that organize people in the public sector, namely water, electricity, gas, public utilities, civil servants, and so on. We didn't actually put the issue on the agenda. It was the United Nations back in 2010 that discussed and voted in the General Assembly for the human right to water. So it was them that actually started the game. And the issue is that back in 2010, the vote in the UN was unanimous in a way of speaking. There were like about 20 countries that actually abstained, which were the US and a few others, but most of the EU did abstain. And well, at the time we look at the situation is why countries that do have a relatively progressive piece of set of legislation regarding to access to water, to the affordability of water and so on, do abstain for such a vote in the UN, the Netherlands or Sweden, for instance. So it was clear there was a lack of, I wouldn't say coordination, because they were very aware of what they were voting, but a lack of willingness of actually moving from a national right into an international one. So just one little short minute on the human right to water, and I think that will be interesting for the broader debate on the right to energy, is that it is actually properly defined at the UN level. So the right to water has to be sufficient, safe, acceptable, physically accessible, and affordable. Safe means clean, so this is WHO and so on. Water is a very specific thing because it's at the same time a service and a resource. As against energy that can be created, water cannot be created. So the vision that water is a global common is true. I mean, at the end of the day, if you go down below, most water is connected in one way or another, while you know, electricity or energy first has many sources and many expressions. You can heat up with coal, with solar panels, with nuclear energy, with many things. Some you might not like it, but it's possible. While water is, we're talking about a very specific amount of drinkable water that we humans can use and that we do not create. So giving those differences, which makes the resource and the service quite different, there is one big element. One big element. Sorry for that. One big element that is actually very important for Europeans. It is that the water market has not been liberalized, and energy has, and that makes a totally different ball set in terms of rights at the European level. Because when you do not have the market determining how a service, like water, electricity, housing, if you would start a comparison, health, and so on, when you do have it liberalized at the European level, i.e. that the internal market has bitten in, or there is a national competence, very often then becomes a regional competence or even a local competence, like in the case of water. How do you approach the application of a right is a slightly different. So we, back in 2010, the discussion is how are we going to put pressure on the EU that didn't vote in the General Assembly, could have done it, could have actually taken a position, but they didn't do it. And they allowed, or they were quite happy to actually allow the member states, most of the member states, to abstain on such a vote. At the very same time, we had, back in 2010, 2011, 2012, we had, well, you know, a big campaigns against privatization of water in many countries, in Greece, in Spain, in Italy, but a referendum in Italy, where 26 million people voted against privatization of water. And shortly after, we had mobilizations in Ireland. We have had pushes against water privatization in cities of countries. So there was a very strong base for a European campaign. I think this is also a key element. It's just, it wasn't a bunch of people in Brussels based, while being Spanish. It wasn't a bunch of people in Brussels deciding that we should launch a campaign, and that's it. There was a ground for it. Now, the legislation was very different from country to country. We had countries in which the legislation was very close to the principles I just mentioned, the Netherlands, some of the Nordic countries, and you had countries in which water was highly mercantilized, and the push was to go even further, and none of those criteria were taken into account. Also, the way that the water is financed differs from country to country. We go from the usual pay through the bill to the ID system, in which everyone pays the water services through their taxes, which is a very specific system, but it actually creates a lot of exemptions for the Irish case. In a way, you could argue that the Irish system is very extremely democratic, since you pay for the service according to your capacity, and then the service is distributed evenly according to the population. And I think this is an important element when you think about the application of a right, because constitutions are full of rights that are not really implemented and applied, and they don't even have secondary legislation, because it would mean an overhaul of the national economy. If you would, for instance, take Spain on the right to housing, you would basically need to tell the big construction multinationals that Spain has, and they act abroad, to build for free, as they would actually portray it. That's another element. When you campaign for a right, you're portrayed as you want to give it for free. I remember a big high-up spokesperson of Nestlé that was accusing me of putting a glass of water at the same level of someone using water to garden their small private golf course. And precisely is the contrary. A rights-based approach is, as the UN definition says, that no one should spend more than 3% of the household income on water. And you could work it out on other issues, and then you could actually have the essential rights should not mean more than 10-15% of your household income. And therefore, those that actually have a lot of money would pay 15% of a lot, and those that have a very little money, or they have state support, they will basically pay all this 10% of that money. Excuse me for that. So in that sense, the campaign was to do a European Citizens Initiative. We collected almost 2 million signatures within the time frame of the Commission. But the most important element for that was to develop a European broad network that would continue to work nationally, first. And second, to create the issue at the national level. As a consequence, this is a bit putting, the medals in my own chest. But as a consequence of the campaign, what we had is like the change of the Slovenian constitution, that the right to water got recognized, and a major mobilization in Ireland that stopped what was seen as a sellout, and they actually put on the table a referendum for the recognition to the right to water. Now there is a big movement in Spain to use the transposition of the Drinking Water Directive into a right. And the idea here is relatively easy, because you can actually try with the UN criteria to, you don't need to try, this doable, and I'll finish with this, to compare to what you can do with energy and what also happens with housing in that sense. This is the idea of giving visibility and the hierarchy of laws. You can go to a provider. I'll just take a Spanish example, so my accent won't surprise you. If you take the town of Medina Sidonia, which is in Cádiz, 5,000 inhabitants, and a local provider, publicly owned, the company changes status, and they put that one of the aims of the water company, water and sanitation company, I've always spoken about the right to water, but also includes sanitation, but let's just move to just for a second on the water. Article 2 of the company is the social aim of the company is to ensure and protect the human right to water of all the citizens of the town, which they've actually worked out, and there is no disconnection with someone that cannot pay. I think there were like 20 disconnections in the last 2 years, and the issue is that those that do not want to pay, but that's another matter. And then all the criteria are fulfilled. That you could do. I mean, we were basically campaigning at the local level, find one city, 2 cities, 1 region, 2 regions, and at the same time at the European level. And the combination of both, it what creates a successful European movement. Now, we are also conscious that I don't know how many city councils will be in Europe, but it's only 10,000 in Spain and 15,000 in France, so that's 25,000. So I would assume like half, I don't know, 250,000 city councils and local regions. If we would try to do the right to water one by one, it'd take a long time. So we would think those campaigns that want and can do it at the local level, they do it at local level, and then at the European level, you have a policy approach. And that's what we've basically done for the last decade, more or less successfully. But it is clear that now we have a very clear demand to local providers, local authorities, regional governments, member states, so national governments, and the EU, which is enshrine the right in the right piece of legislation. And from that, go into the means for the right to be actually implemented. If you actually look at the European,
very much.
Just one phrase, one final phrase. If you look at the European Pillar of Social Rights that has this mention about essential services, now we want an action plan that actually delivers, and not just keep promising, because they promise quite a lot. And that was it. Thank you very much. That was 10 minutes. So
perfect. Thank you very much, Pablo, for this right to water approach. And thank you for introducing the European Pillar of Social Rights, because this is going to be the content of the brainstorming session. So again, here, like Sarah, we have the question of the political will behind this right to water, the liberalization of the market, and then the ownership question, the billing alternative you propose with the initiative, the voice of the citizens to be heard, the local authorities to be involved, the responsibility of the state, quite a lot of keywords. So thank you very much for this, Pablo. And Marta Myers, who is an energy poverty campaigner at Friends of the Earth, and Aurélie Ciuti, who is director of the Wallonian Network for Energy Access, are going to jump in to tell us, okay, how do you advocate a right to energy, both at EU level and then probably in Wallonia as well with Aurélie, and if the previous points raised by the speakers ring a bell for you as energy campaigners. Thank you, ladies. The floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rochelle. Hi, everyone. I'm Martha Myers. I work at Friends of the Earth Europe. I'm also a representative of the Right to Energy Coalition, along with Aurélie. I'm going to share a little bit about the Right to Energy Coalition ourselves, and then into the importance of movement building and narrative work around the right to energy, and then we'll focus at the end towards our kind of agenda and aims for right to energy in EU policy. And then I'll pass over to Aurélie, who will share more of the work of RWADE in Bologna, and their amazing work they're doing on right to energy there. So first of all, some of you may already know the work of the Right to Energy Coalition, and it warms my heart to see this conference with this focus, of course. And the Right to Energy Coalition was originally founded in 2017 by Friends of the Earth Europe, the European Anti-Poverty Network, and EPSU. And it was originally inspired by, as Pablo's work of the Right to Water movement. We bring together a really diverse range of stakeholders to tackle energy poverty. And I think this is one of our main strengths, is that we bring together trade unions, anti-poverty organizations, environmental NGOs, health organizations, social justice groups, energy cooperatives, and social housing providers to come to an issue and really talk to each other to create the most social and environmentally resilient policies available. And this makes us really quite sought after by policymakers and decision makers, because we are really kind of coming together despite maybe some of our differences, to create the most resilient ideas. And also, originally we were a European policy coalition advocacy group. However, we are now around 50% European advocacy, and 50% of our coalition members work at national, regional or local level. And this has been really helpful because our identity now is around empowering the voices of the energy poor to be heard in European policy. So one of our key aims is who is being heard and how. And our main aim of the coalition is for access to clean, affordable energy is a human right. Next slide, please. So I'd like to focus primarily on our narrative. So as the two past speakers have really clearly shown, the Right to Housing movement and the Right to Water movement built a really strong narrative around these ideas not being a paid service or kind of a consumer situation, but that this is a human right. And this is something that we're still building here, particularly in our work in EU policy. And it's kind of really exciting as well what's happening at national level with that. But Aurélie will share a little bit more. And also really changing this idea of it being an invisible burden, which many of us know, energy usage or not being able to pay your energy bills is often seen as a personal struggle. And we're really aiming to change this to show the narrative of being a structural inequality based on inefficient housing, precarious neoliberal energy markets, and also wider injustices. I've listed here a couple more things that we're kind of working with shifting the narrative on, including our language, how we use the ideas of energy poverty and actually changing this towards access to energy, which is a much more empowering and kind of solidarity-based language, particularly for building the movement, and including kind of local, regional and national community organizations. And also here, the focus going from scarcity and zero sum, which many of us know in our current political paradigm is kind of seen as normalized, and changing this to more of a view of abundance. Next slide. So I'll just run through these quite quickly. Our three main demands for a right to energy are the renovations for the energy poor, as we really do believe that, of course, the kind of best energy is the energy that we don't have to use, and inefficient housing is obviously linked as one of the main causes of energy poverty. ban on disconnections, which I will go into a little bit more detail about later. However, it is obviously one of our main aims. Some of our coalition members really pioneer the way in what this means for universality, for instance, as Aurélie will talk about a little bit more later. Also, a minimum amount of energy for all, which Ruth London, Fuel Poverty Action, chatted about a bit yesterday, who is another coalition member, and the Alliance Against Energy Poverty in Catalonia and Spain also just published their report on what a right to energy means, particularly in response to COVID-19. And finally, we focus on energy democracy as our third demand, and how we need to be moving towards a decentralized energy system, particularly involving energy communities to empower citizens. Next slide, please. So before I go into kind of policy agenda, I'd really like to focus on the importance of civil society actors. So at this coalition, we really believe that energy poverty is a political issue that requires a political response. And what we often see in our work when we're working with the Commission or the EU Council, which is a lot of our work at the moment, is this is seen as a technocratic issue. This is seen as something which is almost sterilized away from the humane. And our aim is to make sure that we reiterate that this is a matter of justice, and we bring in the elements here of gender, race and class as specific issues that need to be addressed in this as well. And we really do believe in the power of civil society. So here I'm talking about NGOs, third sector, but also local grassroots groups who we really get a lot of our demands and vision from, because they know the solutions and challenges on the ground. And also civil society actors such as local and national partners are specifically well placed to not only galvanize political awareness and engage the movement, but also to deliver on the right to energy in practice. So to channel funds for renovation, to provide immediate support, to set up community energy projects. So actually galvanizing the movement on the ground is also really key to the success. Next slide, please. And here's some pictures. So here you'll see some of our coalition members. We have Alianza contra la Pobreza Energética, who work in Catalonia and across Spain on energy rights. Fuel Poverty Action's table here in Westminster, and also one of our actions with Friends of the Earth Europe on Heat Our Homes, Not Our Planet. Also the Right to Energy Forum, which we run annually, really focuses on kind of galvanizing the movement and bringing together campaigners, academics, and policymakers to really create a space for change. Our one in December, we had over 1,000 attendees over the 3 days, and we got some really great responses from the Commission and Parliament in particular. And this has kind of led to our success and our involvement this year in legislative change. Next slide. So I'd like to just kind of finalize with, there's quite a lot to tackle with energy poverty at EU level. And we do have a big challenge on our hands, but also a lot of opportunities. And first of all, we were thinking of what our theory of change involved, and it actually is quite a lot. And at the moment, I've focused in this presentation on the movement building and narrative building. However, we do provide a lot of briefings and reports, collection of best practices, and also work on advocacy at EU, national and local level. Next slide. So I'll just finish by showing some of the opportunities towards pioneering the right to energy at EU level this year. I've got here the renovations for energy poor Europeans, which is really high on the agenda this year. And this is a plea also to members of this amazing network to also engage with us on this, because we're currently doing quite a few roundtables with policymakers on the Energy Efficiency Directive and Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. And also the ban on disconnections, so extending COVID-19 emergency measures, and also trying to integrate this into the adaptation strategies and the European Pillar of Social Rights, particularly Principle 20 around access to provisions. And then we're working on some other works here around ETS extensions and renewables. And with that, I will pass over to Aurélie to share more of right to energy work at a national level.
Thanks a lot, Marta, for sharing the floor with me, and thanks for inviting us here. We are really excited, and I am really excited to share with you. So I've been working for the RWADE for 10 years. The RWADE has been created in 2005, just before the liberalization of the market. And it is a coalition gathering unions, social, environmental, anti-poverty, and consumers organizations based in Wallonia. The RWADE advocates for a right to energy, to accessible and sustainable energy for every citizen, and to end energy poverty. We work with households and social workers to build a fair and sustainable society and to achieve energy democracy. Working with people has allowed us to really understand what they experiment and what they need. And it is important to say that energy is never a purpose. It is a tool. It is a tool to have a decent life, to have a social life, to find a work, to take care of one's family, and so on. The first point I wanted to make is the recognition of the right must obviously be done at the legislative level, but also, as Marta said, in the collective imagination, in the mind of decision makers, for example, but also, in fact, in the opinions of citizens who have too often clearly integrated the principle, no money, no energy. So we are trying to work with citizens to change this relationship to energy, which must no longer be seen as a commodity, but as a vital service or as a common good. We try to empower people, starting by defending with them their existing rights. So there's no such thing as a right to energy, but people have rights to a clear and correct bill. They have the right to some protection if they cannot pay. And I have to say, this is already a battle. This is already a battle with big companies, with suppliers. We feel that suppliers knowingly deceive citizens, knowing that only 1 in 1,000 will understand what's going on. It is thus profitable for them to sometimes mislead us. So our work is to provide legal aid and to fight. And it is often a good base to go further to defend a right to energy on a more broader scale. We find different ways to be heard. And we have, for example, met a minister and some politicians with people facing energy poverty, talking about their lives. And it was really powerful, and it leads to a law reinforcement. And we also have built an art exposition. So you can see on the slides some of the artwork that has been done by people experiencing energy poverty. So from our perspective, recognizing a right to energy is, of course, essential. While we were preparing the discussion with Marta, we talked about the narrative, and our narrative, how it can empower or not empower people. And I realized that, of course, we use the energy poverty terms when we talk with academics, government representatives, and so on. But we never use that language with people. You never say to someone, okay, you're in energy poverty, how does that make you feel? We discuss about energy rights and just transition. This is how we speak about that with people. So from our perspective, recognizing the right to energy is essential, but it is only a starting point, because the realization and the effectivity of the right is key. And we also feel that the right to energy goes beyond the fight against energy poverty. And this is really the issue of universality that I will talk about a little bit earlier. So how can the right to energy be made a reality? First of all, and Marta said it, prohibit disconnection and self-disconnection. Self-disconnection are really important to us as well, and this is why we are against pay-as-you-go meters. We have been promoted for years a proposal to forbid any disconnection that has not been decided by a judge. This is how it works in Brussels. And the judge is a really important actor who can rebalance the relationship between the suppliers and the consumer, the citizen. The judge can check if the citizen rights has been respected. And which I said just earlier, it is not so often the case. And Brussels has a really low disconnection rate and a really high poverty rate. 39% of households are at risk of poverty. The proposal has been finally supported by the majority in Wallonia, and we hope it will be voted soon. So it does not mean no more disconnection ever, but it is for us a very strong step. And what happened to make us heard here? The COVID crisis, I have to say, helped, but also we have built new alliance with new actors, such as Federation of Lawyers and the Federation of Judges. They said to the Parliament, disconnection are a too damaging act in people's life, and it cannot be decided through administrative process. It is a sanction, and it must be decided by a judiciary. So it was really powerful. So forbid disconnection. The other point is, of course, to guarantee an affordable price. In Belgium, we have the social tariff. You talked about it yesterday. So it is the cheapest tariff you can ever have in Belgium with less taxes. It is mostly automized, which is really interesting. So people don't have to do administrative work to get it. The problem is that some households who are not necessarily in a more positive situation than those entitled to the social tariff do not benefit from it, but have to finance it through the bill. So we also think we could put in place a free vital block or a block of energy at a very low price. And I know you discussed it yesterday, and we discussed what amount of energy should be provided, what are the essential services. And I think we cannot find the perfect answer to these questions, but we can build a democratic process into which citizens, including people in poverty, can have a democratic debate, not once, but on a regular basis. And yesterday, the question was raised about the link about the energy rights and climate change. And I think it is a really important issue, and I have a lot to say about it, but maybe it will be for the discussion. Because one of the main obstacles we identify to these extremely important measures is the liberalization of the market. Because a system based on the right to profit, on the idea that we could not intervene with the magic market or the invisible end, cannot address our concerns. It is for us crystal clear, and EPSU and RWADE, which is Trade Unions for Energy Democracy, have done a fantastic work about that, though I would let you to that, but we really think we need public ownership. So it is always the same. As soon as we work with targeted measures, a question comes: who deserve, who don't, and how people should prove they deserve. Suppliers always play that trick of trying to narrow down the scope of a measure. And if people have to prove, we know that some of them will not have the right. It is the non-take-up issue, and it is highly problematic. And with targeted measure, we also know that some people will pass a threshold and will not be concerned by the help and will pay for it. And beyond this issue of fairness between citizens, there's also for us a massive issue of social cohesion. How do we ensure that not only the middle class hold the bag, and perhaps even more important, how do we prevent people and politicians from pointing the finger at the poor people? And as Ruth said yesterday, people like the idea of universality. The COVID crisis have shown us how everyone can be at some point vulnerable. So we all need protection, and that's what rights are for. So we really think it is important to work at the recognition of the right for everyone, and at measures that also concern every citizen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aurélie and Martha. Martha, you disappeared, but you must be here somewhere. Thank you very much for this presentation. It's very rich, very interesting, and I mean, you made great loops with what was going on yesterday and the day before. And I really like this idea about changing the narratives that you both mentioned towards, I mean, how can we change the relationship to energy? How can we tackle the injustice issue? How can we go for solidarity and empowerment? If we had a lot of time, I would like to ask you to define what you mean with solidarity and empowerment, but maybe we'll have time later on. And how to make this right effective with the voice of the people. So thank you for these great messages. And we see that Louisa has already written quite a lot of keywords there, like stakeholders, renovation, disconnection ban. I can't see exactly well, but there are quite a lot of issues already summed up. Thanks to Louisa. Thank you very much. So can we ask Pablo and Sarah to come to the stage again with the camera on, maybe to start answering a few questions, George?
Yes, thank you to all the speakers. So this has been quite interesting. Pablo, I think for now you'll have to mute yourself. Thank you. So actually, you have been more active in the Miro board with thoughts and questions for the speakers. But there is still an interesting discussion that is developing in the chat here between Marlis and Marta, which our viewers who are watching the live stream cannot see. So since we are already a little bit late, I would ask Marlis to raise the question out loud. And also, Marta, if you can deliver the answer that we already see in the chat, those of us who are here, but I think that would be a good start to our discussion. And then I will point to some of the questions in the Miro board.
Yes, thanks, George. So the question that I had for Marta is that she mentioned that the right to energy presents a narrative that stands both for empowerment and solidarity. But I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more that idea of solidarity, because I think I agree, but I also sometimes get critique that the rights language would focus too much on the individual, and thereby it's not so much in solidarity. So I wonder what your narrative is there.
I'm happy to pick this up and also hear what Aurélie and the other speakers have to say on this. But for me, solidarity is obviously a word that's thrown around quite often. And actually, for me, it's about not only a narrative of solidarity, so showing that energy access is an empowering journey, and that we need to be empowering people as energy is a human right, but also, you know, what are the methods we're using to gain an access to clean, affordable energy? You know, who are we listening to? And this is something which the Right to Energy Coalition is really trying to kind of bring into EU policy, where many of these discussions often are talking about the energy poor, but often or rarely ever include the energy poor, the lived experience, the real problems on the ground, solutions and challenges. So for me, solidarity is a big word, and you know, I think it's something where we will constantly be challenged. And at the Right to Energy Coalition, we constantly challenge ourselves on, you know, who are we listening to, who is being involved, who is being heard, and who is making the decisions. And for me, that is active solidarity that we try and work towards. But yeah, on a narrative perspective, I think, you know, that's a really interesting comms discussion, which I would love to chat about more as well.
Thank you. There is an interesting observation / question on the Miro board that I would direct to Sarah Coupechoux. Since you spoke about the complexity, so the bureaucratic process of accessing, having access to the right to housing in France, and how difficult that is for people. That is something that came up in the previous 2 days as well. That sometimes is quite complicated and it raises many issues. So there is a question here summarized as how can we make targeted support schemes more workable, right? So Sarah, from your experience, how would that work, right? So I'm sure you have ideas. So you notice how difficult it is. How can it look like in practice so that it works better for those who need it, who need to have access to this process?
Okay, could you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's really complicated, and I don't really have the answer, unfortunately, and I think that nobody has the answer.
You have 1 minute to answer, yes.
Yeah. Maybe we can manage some different angle of the right, putting this right at a high level of universality in constitutions and in some declaration of rights and that kind of thing, with an enforceable way to use it and to enforce the state to manage some policies, always in the same goal. And we can have also in the same time a procedure like in France for housing right, because in fact it gives some tools for people to manage and to go to the court for this is an individual tool to have this right. So, but we need to give some means, some resources for organization to support the most vulnerable to go to the court to access to right. And this is a lot of things to have at the same time. So I think it's not easy at all.
For sure. Thank you, Sarah. There is another observation on the Miro board, which I would direct to Pablo, because it refers to a difference in how water and energy are perceived. So water is already perceived, or usually perceived, as a common, whereas energy, for some reason, is not yet perceived as a common, or that kind of interpretation occurs less often. Why do you think that is the case? And Pablo, if there is any way in which we can frame this to have energy as a common more often?
Sorry for the background cello that is playing. If you hear it, it might.
We love it.
Well,
thank you for the musical background.
Of all the things you could do, I think that's the best for the meeting. Well, this is a common question, because energy, as I said, is what? Gas, coal, the wind, the sun. It's a common good. The nuclear power plant of the 42 that exist in France. I don't know if the people that defend commons will be very keen on having nuclear power plants as a common. Now, the issue, there are no legal definition of a common good at any member state. The only one that has a work on this is Italy, with the Commission Rodotà. And I was involved in an experiment of an intergroup at the European Parliament, and it's very difficult because there is also some work on digital commons in the French National Assembly, but so we do not have really a very clear definition of what is a common good. Is that the community? Is the commoners? So therefore, it's very difficult because we're using like a bit of a jargon term. So we have the term of public good, and then we would think that the electricity production should be a public good. And I think we should also, in legal terms, we should be on safe grounds. Because if you actually look at and you have a lot of time free, but you look at all the EU legislation since the night of times, so far in a legislative text, there is only one reference to a common good, and is this sentence: financial markets are a common good and they should be protected by all. That is what the EU has as a reference. Now, the Commission, so in a regulation. It's only in the preamble, so it's not really legally binding, but then it's only the Economic and Social Committee. This is a very European response. I think it's important because we should, as I said, stick to our guns and say electricity should be a public good. Maybe we could start talking about a public company for electricity. That is something we could. There is the world of those that decentralized and cooperatives and so on, which is shouldn't go against an entity, but I think that we need to be offensive, if you like the term, in terms of proposing at the European level. So the market is liberalized. So what do we want? We could argue for a cooperation of public entities like the space programs, like the Leonardo program, or things like this. So that's why we don't call it a common good, because I don't think there is any legal base at this stage. We can continue the debate. Is a bit of a theoretical one, but we needs to go hand in hand with the creation of the legal concept of a common good. Voilà, that's the.
Thank you, Pablo. And these are some very good like reference points when it comes to other things that are regarded as common goods. I will take just one final point from the Miro board, because fortunately or unfortunately, we will have to move to the next section. And I will direct this to Aurélie. So in the end, and Aurélie, you can use this as an opportunity to kind of like provide a conclusion to this first part of our session. Should the right to energy be about access, universal access, or should it target only the vulnerable consumers, citizens, right? So that was a discussion that occurred yesterday as well. So I would, for those of you who participated in yesterday's session as well, I would point you to your thoughts from yesterday. So should this be directed to everyone, or only to those that qualify as being vulnerable?
Thank you, George. As I said, we really think that it should be a right for everyone. But it does not mean, for the reason that I explained, for the fact that as soon as you target measures, you lose a lot of people with the non-take-up issues, with all the complicated administrative formalities that requires activating a right. And because of social cohesion, I think the COVID crisis has damaged, and I can see that the organizations I work for are really worried about social cohesion, and really think that we also need protection for everyone, but it does not mean that everyone have to finance it in the same way. So we really think somehow people should be able to contribute regarding their financial means and resources.
Thank you. So this probably also relates to the previous question about making, or how can we make the whole process a bit easier. So if you don't have to apply and qualify for receiving something that is otherwise a right to something, then you lose most of the bureaucratic problem. Thank you to all the speakers. Rachel, should we add anything else here, or we can go straight to the second part of our session?
Yeah, it's a bit frustrating because a lot of questions should be raised after the presentations, but maybe the breakout rooms will be an opportunity to keep talking about all these questions. So if you have time, so this is a question to you, the speakers, to join the different groups, to exchange with them, that would be a great opportunity for all of us to discuss further with you. So George.
So what will happen now is that our colleagues in the technical team, Lynn and Clemens, will randomly assign you to 3 breakout rooms in which we invite you to discuss for the next 30 minutes around these 3 questions that you now see, that we're now seeing. Yes, and that we can now see on this slide. And we will point you again to the Miro board and move to the next frame, where you can find 3 vertical frames, each of them divided with 5, each of them divided in 3 tables, each of them with 5 sticky notes. So we encourage you to stick to those sticky notes and not use more than 5 for your table. You have 30 minutes for 3 questions. So you'll see a timer with 10 minutes. Okay, so 10 minutes for each question. When 10 minutes pass, you are invited to move to the next question. So go to discuss among yourselves, go to the Miro board, grab a table, 1, 2, or 3, very lightly marked with those numbers, and decide what your answers are to the questions that are visible in each frame, and write the answers in the sticky notes around your table. Okay, and once this happens, so after 30 minutes, you will be brought back to the main room. We encourage you not to close this tab. in which you see this collaboration room. If you do, no worries, you will see a link to this room, so you can come back here. Worst case scenario, go back to the website, click the button there, and you'll be brought back to the main room. For the wrap up, so for debriefing of the brainstorming session, and then for a conclusion of the session overall. So I hope this is clear for everyone. Again, you will be divided into 3 groups now, and we encourage you to be, I will drop by every now and then, and we encourage you to be as interactive as possible while there. Thank you.
So I don't know if we're going to be assigned to a specific
is the narrative. As long as there is no shared societal understanding that energy is, in fact, a common and a right to energy is something that people should be entitled to, there is not even support. So even if you vote, probably the majority wouldn't vote for a right to energy. And on the other hand, there's the understanding that what we need is hard law. That's how Pablo, who apologized that he had to leave for something technical that he had to solve. So he was like advocating for we need hard law, otherwise we can't enforce anything. And between that, there is the acceptance that the market is handling energy supply, which is the other big thing of what is missing. There's no understanding that maybe the market is a failure in this respect. Okay.
And that's where the revolution was supposed to start, actually, when you observe the failure of the market.
Yeah, but I think this is not just our group. This is something that came out from a lot of those post-its.
Okay, so maybe table 2 could answer the same question. Did you end up with the same observation? Table 2? I don't know who was in table 2. Maybe George, you know better.
I think we had Marlies in table 2.
Marlies, are you here?
Yes, I'm here, but
were you in table 2?
I was in table 2, yes. But I was hoping that Marta was interested to take the floor and to explain, because she was just quite interested in sort of trying to pick our brains on these questions. And I was curious what she sort of took from it. So I don't know if Marta wants to give the summary. That's also an option.
Marta, would you jump in?
Sure. So yeah, we talked more broadly around the challenges of addressing and kind of bringing in measures, particularly on the ban on disconnections at EU level, and some of the hurdles of that. One of which being that energy poverty has kind of been put into the remit of DG ENER, which is mainly working on energy and particularly DG ENER, the Energy Efficiency Department. So this is why we'll see with the renovation wave, there's quite a lot of movement around addressing and tackling energy poverty. However, when we come to more social policy discussions, we found that when we chat to DG ENER around, for instance, a ban on disconnections or a minimum amount of energy, they really feel like it's not within their remit. And when we talk to the social committee or social policy, they also say energy poverty is not within our remit. So we identify the difficulties between this grey zone of dealing with energy poverty in EU policy. We're also talking about the difficulties of overcoming the European Commission's commitment to the neoliberal energy market and how the recommendations of energy poverty, the first recommendation that came out in October 14th last year, was basically to not challenge the kind of liberalisation of the energy market, which is obviously a difficult one, and recognising that it is a huge, kind of powerful body, to literally powerful and kind of metaphorically powerful body, to try and challenge energy suppliers towards a more kind of regulated or kind of socially sustainable policy. And on the second question, I actually can't see it on the Miro at the moment. But yeah, we were focusing on, Sarah mentioned the importance of the renovation wave and addressing split incentives. And we talked about the importance of energy savings as a form of, kind of a right to energy in a more structural sense. as well as that, we talked about the importance of the European Pillar of Social Rights, the adaptation strategies, and the wording limits. So whether we talk about access but not affordability. And on the third one, sorry if I'm missing anything, please jump in, group 2. And then on the third point, we talked a little bit more around energy democracy, decentralized energy ownership, energy communities, and the role that renewables play in this. And part of our work at the Right to Energy Coalition is we're working on the synergies between the Renewable Energies Directive, the Buildings Directive, and the Energy Efficiency Directive to make sure that we are providing renovations and renewables for the energy poor. Because whilst we're in this centralised energy market where there are only a few people that have the power, we really need to move towards a decentralized and empowering energy market where people are able to take ownership of their energy, and we can do this through renewable installations and community energy ownership programs. And yes, please do jump in, others in group 2, with your thoughts. We weren't as good on writing on the Miro, so yeah, and maybe I missed some other people's points.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marta, for this wrap up. If you have time, Marta, I would like to invite you to join us at the bar afterwards, because Catherine just put another question in the chat, but I think unfortunately we're not able to tackle the question now. And actually in table 1, we raise more questions than answers for the 2 other questions, and we always put forward the tension lines between a universal right or an individual right. So how do we do that typically for the content of the right? And I think at some point, Catherine, if you use the sticky note for another table for the decentralization part, in order to say that we need to transform the energy market as such. So sorry for this quick wrap up. It's because we have just 1 minute left.
Rachel, I think we can take 2-3 more minutes for group 3 to deliver some thoughts, and then let's not forget about the poll at the end.
Absolutely.
While you are enjoying already a glimpse of quite a relevant glimpse of the visual summary for today.
But who was in group 3?
I think we had Raul, we had Melania.
Okay, can you jump in?
Hello, everyone. Maybe if Raul or Aurélie can't really jump in.
I think Aurélie left, but hi.
Okay.
Either one of you.
We do have Raul. Please go, Raul.
Okay, I hope. So the one of the main thing is right that we can say the same problem, no? That in table 1 we raised many questions, but one of the main things we were discussing is about the influence of lobbies in the process. No, this is not only an issue or in the legislation process, and it's not only that we need to intervene the market, but also how the lobbies can influence in this process. Also, we raised the lack of basic infrastructure. This is now in rural areas, isolated areas, in which those people need to pay further prices to get that minimum energy services. This is from question 1. In question 2, overall, we discussed that we should provide free energy to those people who can't pay for it, but that energy will be paid for those people who have more money. A solution could be something like a social tariff for vulnerable people. That could be some interesting solution. For that, for the last question, I think the most important thing that we were discussing is that we don't want more false neutral regulator. We want people not to be involved in a fair regulation design process. So that is not, at least from my view, the most important thing we were discussing in the last question. But sorry if I'm missing something from the discussion. Maybe someone else can jump in and say something else.
Thank you very much. Table 3 via Raoul voice to summarize what you've been discussing in 1 minute is a bit difficult, but thank you very much. And Marlies, I hope you know what false neutral regulators means now in the head of table 3. So I see that Luisa did a great job, both for the panel discussion as well as for the content of the 3 questions in the brainstorming session. So it's really small, so I can't read it, but I see the big word decentralization. I see another big word lobbies. Thank you for putting that out, Luisa, as well. And solidarity, I think to me that would be the three most important keywords probably, not only, but I don't see the others. So Luisa, sorry for my short summary. Maybe George, you see it better.
I think everyone would have the curiosity to check in tomorrow morning or before noon when the email is sent to all those who registered, and you'll be able to see the final result of Luisa's effort this evening. So thank you to all 3 groups. I think this is quite rich in terms of inputs and ideas. Now, as I assume you all expected, we did not find the answer to the question that guided this day, but I think we can all agree that we got a little bit more perspectives rather, around this issue, and the fact that there is still a little bit of, we can even say, disagreement among us about what are the best ways to tackle the issues that prevent the implementation of a right to energy, how we should formulate it, what it should refer to, how it should be implemented, and by whom. Now, of course, these were all questions that we had in mind in the previous 2 days as well, and that we'll keep in mind for the next 2 days of the forum, because remember, we still have Thursday and Friday evening when we hope, again, as many of you as possible will join to continue the conversation. But even if we do not have the answer around the right to energy, we still prepare the poll for you. So I think we can bring that up now, in which we are very quickly asking you to solve the problem and just tell us yes or no if the right to energy can solve energy poverty. So if this is the solution or not, and you see the 2 options, just a yes or a no, no middle ground.
No alternative, or yes. I don't know, you need to decide yes or no.
So push a button, the button of your choice, and we will see the results on the screen in a second. I should vote myself, right?
Yeah, I think so. Please, George. I mean, it's not about convincing anyone around this table that we need or we don't need a right to energy. It's just because, yeah, it's a real question, and we have been discussing it in table 1 with the example of Germany and the example of housing as well. So I think it's interesting to see what you all think about this right to energy. So I suppose Martha and Aurélie have voted yes. So we have already 2 votes for the yes, I hope, but probably we may have more. So the results are yes for 59% and no for 41%. So we see that the tension lines are still existing between the yes, we need a right, or no, we don't need a right. And I think this reflects quite well the discussions we had been having so far with this difficulty to understand what a right to energy could look like in order to address energy poverty. So I guess the campaigners for energy poverty and for advocating in favor of a right to energy, you still have a lot to do. So thank you very much. George, let's go to the bar.
Yes, everyone, please join the bar. If you still have time, it doesn't matter if, so basically we can continue the discussion there. There will be no more live stream, so we can be a little bit less formal. Bring on children, pets, and anything that might be around you, and any kind of drink you like. I will have tea myself because there's no beer at the office. So thank you everyone for staying up late, we can say, and for joining us. And remember, the full recording of the live stream will be available on YouTube for now. And yeah, I hope to see as many of you tomorrow for a session which will be moderated by Raul and Anais. And I'm pretty sure we'll have even more food for thought after that. So thank you and have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you all for your contributions. See you in the bar or later tomorrow, maybe. Bye.